So the day came. Formation was supposedly finished. The year was 1996. Um, you have to be 35 years old to be a permanent deacon without a dispensation. I think I was 36 at ordination. Um, I wasn't sure what I got myself into. I knew that in my heart that I had volunteered to go on a journey to help Father John perform a service. If in all of the studies that you learn about the permanent diaconate, you realize one of the most key parts of being a deacon in the Catholic Church is to be a person of service. It's not a liturgical role. It's not a person who is supposed to be getting dressed up with all kinds of albs and stoles and prancing around. It's supposed to be somebody that works in the workplace and then brings that story back to the church. So when the priest looks and says, "How is Mrs. Jones doing?" Well, you're supposed to know because you're in the workplace. You represent the people. But the call to ordination is the same call that a priest and a bishop and a pope and cardinals receive. It's a call to serve God's people. That's what the permanent diaconate is supposed to be about. Now, can you do that in a lot of different ways? Yes. But for St. Michael's, the initial call was liturgical. And I knew that that's not what the diaconate was supposed to be about because I had paid attention to learning about the diaconate and all the literature I could read. But at the time, it made sense that that's what the need was. And so I did. And if you knew Father John, there was no way I was going to baptize a child or officiate at a wedding unless I did it right. And when I say did it right, I meant did it the way that he did it, not as good as he does it, but that you did it. And it was a certain level of expertise or quality or show that needed to happen. And so I was trained, and he spent hours and hours and hours training me. Now remember, never spoke in public, could barely read, certainly had never read in public. And so I had 3.5 years to prepare for the big performance, the big show, and I was petrified. The first time that I stood over top of the same bowl that we had had since the beginning of the church to baptize a baby, I looked down at my feet underneath of the alb, and I said, "What am I doing here?" I said, certainly the church has people who are better qualified, certainly a lot smarter, certainly a lot more spiritual than I am. And I got this sense that first day of being in a line of men who have gone before me that have performed baptisms. And it was overwhelming. And it never happened like that except at that first time where you got this sense of you're standing in a long line of holy men who've gone before you. And I remember saying to myself, please don't screw this up, because you're in that line after ordination. I didn't expect anything from ordination. I certainly didn't expect any graces or gifts from ordination. I expected to be given permission to do things in the church that I wasn't allowed to do. But the very fact that I was standing there baptizing my first child was a testimony to what ordination should be, this conversion of how you looked at your life, this preparation time of how you're preparing to serve God's people, and then to actually do it. And it was awesome. It was overwhelming. It was powerful. And I'll never forget that. And so I did. The first wedding I ever did, Father John stood in the back of the church. I was nervous. He was nervous. The couple was nervous. Everyone knew it was my first wedding. I got through it. Afterwards, he said, "Nice job. I won't be back." He couldn't stand watching it. I couldn't stand him being there. It was certainly a mentor relationship in the sense that he was handing on his gifts to somebody else. He was proud. He was scared. He was nervous, just like any father would be, that he was handing on something to me that was so powerful in his life. And so I started, and for the next 2 years, all I did was baptize babies and officiated weddings, work a full-time job, and was involved in at least 2 or 3 ministries at the church. Life was busy. I ran into some opposition early on about how unfair and how unjust the diaconate was, but in the beginning process, you got a sense of how much people appreciated that you had taken the time to go on this journey. and then how much you could help the church and serve the church in a different way. For me, it was never about one was more important. One had more knowledge. One was better than another. It was the many roles that the church had, and I was just filling one of those roles. I didn't know a lot about it. I still hadn't seen a deacon function in any capacity, and so I was learning. The problem is I was learning with the one model, the understanding that Father John had and what he needed me to do. And so I learned how to do that. And I wasn't in any hurry to do anything else. And so it was this balancing act between being present at home and working a full-time job and volunteering at the church. It was powerful years. It was years of experience of learning to be with people. It was learning somehow, because you were ordained, you were supposed to have answers that there's no way in the world you could possibly have. But this deep sense of just being present, just walking with, just journeying with the folks that were in the congregation. So it changed a little bit, but not a lot. In the middle of all of that, Father John went back to the bishop and asked him to start a formal program for the permanent diaconate. So I had been ordained probably as much as a year or a year and a half, and a formal program was started. I was on the team that helped form the first class of deacons that came here to St. Michael's. St. Michael's was really the birthplace of the formation, certainly the birthplace of my experience. We had like 45 guys that went on a 4-year journey. They met here once a month. We had a bunch of guys from St. Michael's that jumped in. Deacon Andy Ferguson, Deacon Bob Griffin were in that original class. It was a great time for me because we were bringing in professors from all around the country, mostly St. Monrad's, that were helping with the formation process, the intellectual part, the spiritual part. It was a time for me to diaconate for morning prayers, to be present. But I wanted that class to know one thing more than anything else, that I was there to serve them, that I was there to help them, that I was there to help set up tables or clean up the trash afterwards. I wanted them to understand from the very beginning that this wasn't about the collar, this was about service. This was about trying to humble yourself and to be of service to God's people. I try to do that without saying that. I try to do that by actions. I think most of them got it in the sense of the church is bigger than we are, that we have a very specific role, but all of us are gifted in different ways, and God calls us to use our own giftedness to help each other, and most importantly, to help the church. So it was a good experience in so many ways to watch these guys get formed. I felt proud of them at ordinations that we had for them. They did a nice job. They took their formation seriously. The problem was for the church, the sex scandal blew up right in the middle of that. Father John was involved in that. And so we were trying to finish a formation program when the world that we knew had just about come to an end, where St. Michael's was deeply impacted by everything that was going on outside. I tried to concentrate on making sure the program got finished, to be of service as best as I could through that process. We did. We got them ordained, and they began their journey as deacons in the church. At that point, I really truly wanted to go back to my old life. I had stepped forward. There was a need. I had filled the need. I had punched the check in the sense of the need wasn't there anymore. We had a bunch of deacons running around. And so I withdrew, went back to what I thought was my normal life. And it wasn't until about 3 months later that Deacon Andy Ferguson started dragging me back into the church to do stuff because I had disappeared. I was happy. I loved being a deacon, but I also loved being a father. I also loved a lot of different things that I could do outside of the church. So it was a conscious effort for him